Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Jayshree Bhatt, Assistant VP for Professional Education and Workforce Development at the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley. I'd like to welcome you all to this webinar and thank you for carving out time to join us this morning. I know that our speakers today have valuable information to share, so I'll keep it very brief. Let me take a moment to introduce Dr. Sanjay Sarma, Fred Ford Flowers and Daniel Ford Flowers Professor of Mechanical Engineering at MIT, where he also serves as the Vice President for Open Learning. He is the co-author of The Inversion Factor, published by MIT Press, and Grasp, the Science Transforming How We Learn. And Dr. William B. Bonvillian is a lecturer at MIT in the program in Science, Technology, and Society. He also serves as the Senior Director of Special Projects at MIT's Office of Digital Learning. He is the co-author of Structuring an Energy Technology Revolution and Advanced Manufacturing, both published by the MIT Press. They will be presenting their findings included in their book, Workforce Education, A New Roadmap. The book offers a roadmap for rebuilding America's working class. The authors argue that we need to train more workers more quickly, and they describe innovative methods of workforce education that are being developed across the country. We can't tackle inequality unless we equip our workers for 21st century jobs, focusing on three sectors: manufacturing, healthcare, and retail. Their book investigates programs that reimagine workforce education, from short, intensive courses that offer certification to a new model for apprenticeships. They examine the roles of community colleges, employers, governments, and universities in workforce education and describe new education technologies that can deliver training to workers. And without any further ado, I'd like to present Dr. Sarma and Dr. Bonvillian from MIT.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bhatt.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to present. If you can have the slides. Thank you very much. So if you go to the next slide, I'll just kick things off by saying that, even before coronavirus, it was very clear that the workforce needed to fundamentally rethink, or workforce education was a topic that needed a fundamental rethink in America. And coronavirus has brought everything into stark focus. The fact of the matter is that in America, compared to some European countries, we understand what primary, secondary, and tertiary education is, but we are not sure what workforce education truly is. And it's becoming very central to everything we do. My office, I'm the Vice President for Open Learning at MIT. I head up a pretty large effort that is doing quite pioneering work in everything from the science of learning to online content development to new credentials to blockchain-based proof of credentials. And the question really is, as we were doing that, we realized that the median age of students in our courses was 27. And so clearly the workforce is hungry for this. So that's how I reached out to my friend and colleague, Bill Bonvillian, who's my co-presenter, to talk about how we could really understand what the workforce needed and how our content could fit the bill. And then coronavirus hit. And coronavirus, what COVID-19 has done is it's put things into stark and sad focus, because a trend that was playing out somewhat more slowly has been accelerated rapidly by the pandemic. And the consequences of our growing economic inequality have become very clear. And the poor and the working class have paid a very disproportionate price in terms of sickness, loss of life, and economic loss. Today, of course, unemployment numbers are staggering, more than 10 million. But more sort of concerning is the labor non-participation rate, which is extremely high. In many industries, many sectors have been severely, if not permanently damaged, whether it's in-person retail, you've seen the growth of online restaurants, hospitality, travel, and so on, just to name a few. So if you go to the next slide, there's a McKinsey report out on the pandemic. And what it says is, and Bill will talk about it in a few minutes, is that before the pandemic, it was the middle class that was being hollowed out. And, the higher wage earners were doing fine, and the lower wage earners were doing fine. But what the McKinsey report says is that the lower wage earners are now beginning to suffer really badly as well, because job mobility is going down because jobs are changing, and workforce education becomes even more important now after the pandemic than it was before, not just for the middle class but also for low wage earners. Yeah, it reminds it one of what happened after World War II. 16 million soldiers and sailors returned from World War II, and many countries had to institute various mechanisms to pull them back into the workforce. And in America, of course, it was the GI Bill, which created a more employed workforce for newer, better jobs, and it worked. And we think, and we will state, that something similar is needed today. Workforce education needs to be taken on at a grand scale to address the gaps that are emerging, and also to lift the workforce into new, higher paying jobs, more satisfying jobs. Next slide. So our book, Workforce Education: A New Roadmap, that Dr. Bhatt mentioned, came out of a report that we wrote, funded by the Schmidt Futures Foundation. And the report was triggered as follows. As I said earlier, my office, Open Learning, has created new credentials like the MicroMasters, professional education programs, new online courses, boot camps. And so I reached out to, as I said, a friend and colleague, Bill, and I said, Bill, we need to understand, we're doing this from an MIT perspective. We know what MIT wants to produce. We know what our students want to produce. But what is the demand side in the larger world out there, especially in America, in the in industry, amongst people who are working, people between ages 25 and 45. And so the Schmidt Futures Foundation funded us. We did the study, and we wrote a final report, which then turned into this book, Workforce Education. Next slide, Bill.
So what is the workforce education challenge? What are the issues? What are the problems that we see? So we see there's a big disconnect in the US between work and learning. They just aren't well connected. The pathways are not at all smooth. There's an abrupt dislocation between the two. There is disinvestment by both government and employers in workforce education. Our Labor Department training programs don't reach higher technical skills or incumbent workers, whereas the Education Department programs really are focused on college, not workforce needs, and they aren't linked back to the Labor Department programs. Vocational education in our secondary schools was largely dismantled roughly about 20 years ago or so. We have underfunded community colleges that lack the resources to provide advanced training in new fields that have completion rates in their programs that are much too low. Our colleges and universities are disconnected from workforce education. They don't think it's their problem. We've got lifelong learning, which is missing at all levels, although we know we're going to need it. We've got underfunded advanced technical programs. There's some very good programs at both NSF and at the Advanced Manufacturing Institutes, for example, now. But they are small, they're underfunded. We've got a broken labor market information system, which we'll talk more about in a minute. And look, change is hard because these sectors are legacy sectors. They're established, they're complex, they are hard to change. And it's not just the coronavirus. As Sanjay noted, we've got long-standing job quality problems. And so to elaborate on points he began making earlier, we've got increasing inequality, not economic convergence in our society. And that's been a festering problem now for 15 years. In a society that prided itself on its strong middle class, its growing middle class, on its social mobility, on its increasing economic equality, we've now turned a corner and gone in the other direction. And there's an economist at MIT, a colleague of ours named David Otter, who presents this as a barbell problem. So you can see the barbell on your slide. Can you go to the next slide, Monica? You can see the barbell on your slide. There's a growing upper middle class on the left side bell, and then the bar is the middle class, and that's been thinning out. And too many in that middle class are being shunted over to a growing lower end services sector, which is expanding as well. But that powerful and crucial middle class has been thinning out. And then what's been happening with COVID, as Sanjay pointed out, there's sectors like retail, for example, and others like hospitality that have been so affected that we're losing the lower end services jobs at an unexpected, unanticipated rate. So at the moment in our society, the expanding sector is that left bell, the upper middle class bell, and you need to upskill to get back in that kind of direction. So technological advances, especially in IT, are putting many quality jobs out of reach for workers who didn't get the right skills and the right training. So we looked at workforce needs in 3 large sectors that are 30, next slide, Monica, please, that are 30% of total US employment. The first of those sectors is manufacturing. Manufacturing had been a middle-class pathway, particularly for men who tended to dominate those jobs without college educations. But it was a crucial way into the middle class for that community and their families. But median income is down for men without high school diplomas or without high school diploma or some college, without that combination. And it's down pretty sharply, particularly for those without high school diplomas, it's down 20%. US manufacturing employment fell by 1/3 between 2000 and 2010. It's slightly better, but not close to where we were in 2000. We've got the highest overall labor non-participation rate. Coronavirus hit some sectors in manufacturing, for example, aircraft production, but made clear the need for much more resilient supply chains. Think about what's going on in semiconductors and how that's really hitting the auto industry. Think about what's going on in the pharmaceutical sector that we saw for the first time during coronavirus. We need more resilient supply chains. We need more flexible manufacturing. And those mean new manufacturing technologies, and that in turn means new skills for the workforce. So in manufacturing, although jobs came down, those jobs have stabilized, but this is an aging workforce in that world. So we're going to lose over 2 million people to retirements this coming decade. This aging demographics is really catching manufacturing hard. So there will be new job opportunities in manufacturing in significant numbers, but it's going to be more advanced manufacturing. It's going to require higher skills. Next slide, please. Sanjay?
Retail. Thank you, Bill. Retail is a very interesting sector. The interesting fact is, even by 2005, it was clear that US retail was a little bit in trouble. The growing mall and strip mall movement resulted in the US having a retail per square foot per capita or square footage per capita metric that was 6 times that of Europe and 50% more even than Canada. Canada is a good comparator here because it's similar to the US, but it's colder. So you would assume there'd be more need for sort of indoor space, retail, malls, etc. But the US is significantly more than Canada. And so it was already teetering when the 2008 crash occurred. And after the 2008 financial crisis, retail in the US moved into what I would call a discount model. And the basic idea is that employees became more sort of, frankly, dumbed down. And the stores were operated more from a cost control basis and less from the basis of service, which I'll come to in a second. Meanwhile, of course, in the late 90s, Amazon had already been founded and online retail was taking off. So the other tsunami that's converging in all this is the online revolution. And by 2015, more and more retail was going from shop floors to the back warehouse. And warehousing means, of course, on the one hand, can be more roboticized. In fact, there's a company called Kiva Robotics that came out of MIT alums who are here in Boston, the Boston area, that was acquired by Amazon. for about $715 million and became Amazon Robotics. So robotics is becoming a bigger deal. So that means that retail can be more roboticized. The other interesting trend, unfortunate trend, is shop floors have more women, but warehouses have more men. So unlike in manufacturing, here the gender shift is the other way. So more men are finding jobs in warehousing. And then of course 2020 hit, and the coronavirus, which means that retailers are in big trouble. Paying rents, carrying inventory, no foot traffic, and the world goes to online. So this has a massive impact in accelerating some of the trends that we just went through in 2020 and 2021 onwards. It's going to be a whole other world. Now, there is another, in fact, model emerging in retail that is high tech, high touch, high service. What I mean by that is think of the Amazon Genius Bar or an Amazon store. The Amazon store is all about service.
Apple.
I'm sorry, I
Apple,
beg your pardon.
Sanjay.
Sorry, Apple.
Apple.
I'm ironic because I'm saying this looking into my Apple screen here. I meant to say Apple. Thank you, Bill. So in the Apple store, you see the shop floor assistants are in fact huge experts on Apple. They are very committed. They wear Apple T-shirts. They're salespeople. They give you a little bit of service. There's a Genius Bar in the back where they can service, give advanced training sessions. That's a very different retail staff than the sort of retail staff you might see in a typical, dollar store. And then another thing that's happening in retail is omni-channel. The basic idea is that you can order online, pick up in the store, order in the store, pick up online, and all combinations in between, or even showroom stores where the store actually doesn't do any selling. It's like bonobos, right? You go there and you just see stuff, but all the merchandise is shipped from a warehouse to your house. And all this means that either retail is going to get more high tech or it's going to become more service oriented, which means a huge opportunity for workforce training, not just of the staff, but of first level managers, etc., in everything from Bluetooth beacons to product training. The examples, by the way, here are Apple, not Amazon, but also Sephora. Sephora is another example of high touch service. And this looks like a big trend, which means workforce education becomes very important. Next slide.
And then healthcare is the third sector we looked at, a very different sector because it's a rapidly growing sector. We've got an aging population. It's got higher healthcare demands. And there are a suite of new medical technologies that are entering this sector, and they are creating new kind of technical professions within healthcare. So the result of this is that there will be more jobs with higher skills needed, and therefore we're going to need new training systems. Now, there are barriers here to the entrance of those new fields, those new technology-based fields. The established healthcare professions, limit entry. But here, online entry and online training could be a big help. Next slide, please. So across the whole economy, we can see it in these three sectors, but we can see across the whole economy, an upskilling is ongoing. So jobs are increasingly going to the college educated. Having some college has replaced high school as a core job credential. But what does that college degree mean? In too many cases, it can be a default credential because nobody knows quite what it stands for in the way of job skills. But meanwhile, we've got growing information technology that's entering at rapid clip, demanding new skills. So the result is new high or middle skill jobs are going to require more education beyond high school. Yet only 1/3 of Americans over age 25 have a 4-year college degree. That tells us that we're going to need a new workforce education system. Next slide, please. And where do we need attention on that workforce education system? We've got weak labor market information systems. Strong markets are based on strong information. And we've got very decentralized, weak labor markets in the US because the information system behind them is not strong. Workers don't know what skills they need for jobs. Educators don't know what skills to educate for. Employers don't know what skills the workers coming to them that want jobs have. We don't have a good information system in those labor markets. Another problem, the transition from school to work is a deep problem in the US, right? We largely ended vocational high schools. We've got community colleges that are underfunded where the completion rates are too low. We contrast this to countries like Germany, Austria, Switzerland, that have very strong apprenticeship programs where work starts during secondary school and the transition is very smooth. We're in a situation where the high school diploma is not enough, and we don't have a good transition from school to work. Another issue, our colleges and universities largely are unengaged. That's not true, obviously, in some universities. In some of the land-grant universities around the US, some of the public universities are doing a much better job on this. But by and large, colleges and universities are not engaged in workforce prep. They don't think it's their problem, right? They think that's a high school problem, not their problem. And yet, the college credential is the crucial degree now. So we lack, in addition, a transferable skills certification system in most fields. And our education and labor departments are not aligned. And as I briefly noted this earlier, but the Labor Department has programs that are focused on the unemployed and underemployed, who obviously need help, but they're not focused on upskilling the workforce. They're not focused on incumbent workers, and they don't reach new entrant workers and upskilling them. While the Education Department has a lot of money in Pell Grants, but those are focused on degree programs, not really on workforce programs. Next slide, please. Sanjay?
So the good news is that there are lots of new technologies coming down the pike. Of course, online education is an important one, a very important one. This is the first time during COVID when technology has been a thread that humanity is hung by, right? So we are all surviving. Here we are, Bill and I and Jayashree, in our different Monica, probably operating from home or social distanced offices. And so online is huge, and online education saw a massive resurgence or a massive increase during COVID. In some cases, 10 or 100x, because 1.6 billion students were separated from their education institutions, and millions and millions, hundreds of millions of adults separated from work, trying to upskill. And there are new technologies coming down the pike: virtual reality, augmented reality, computer gaming, simulation, blockchain-based certification. The idea is that credentialing will take off, and you should be able to prove your credential with a blockchain-based link. This is something MIT is leading. Boot camps, which is not a technology, but a new modality. The idea is you do stuff online and you get together for a week and do a boot camp to practice in person or with equipment. And eventually we'll have AI-based tutoring. And all these things will happen in the years ahead. So these are exciting times, and we're working on all of these things at MIT. Next slide. But the important thing here is EdTech actually enables a whole new pedagogy. COVID-19, as I said, increased online education. There's a bit of a tragedy here as well, in the sense that what we saw with a lot of Zoom or WebEx or whatever lectures actually is not good online education. That's just remote education. And it's important to make a distinction between remote education and good online education. Good online education is asynchronous videos. Good online education is, automatic assessment, sort of the stuff you see in massive open online courses like edX or Coursera or Udacity. If you go to YouTube, you see amazing videos, really amazing videos, but they're short 10-minute chunks. That's good pedagogy. Zoom lectures are the worst of both worlds. They neither have the little charm of being in person, nor the good production of asynchronous pre-recorded videos, which are designed for it. Zoom lectures is teachers and professors being heroic in the face of a unanticipated historic pandemic. So I just want to clarify that what EdTech actually does done right is it enables new pedagogies, but that's not necessarily what you're seeing if your kids are studying at school, at home. They're not actually doing the new pedagogy, and they're not doing good online. If you go to the next slide. Really, if you want to do EdTech and education and pedagogy online, the EdTech has to be designed in a certain way. First of all, you want small 10-minute chunks. If you go to YouTube and check out, for example, the channel 3 blue, 1 brown, or minute physics, or crash course physics, or crash course history, or science ASAP, or Viheart. Amazing content, beautifully distilled in 10-minute chunks, which turns out to be much more compatible with the way the human brain operates, how we form memories. And then online problems, automatic grading. You can even write a program, a computer program, and have it graded. AI tutors, all that stuff. But what it enables is new pedagogy in the classroom. And so then what happens is when the pandemic ends, students can still get a lot of the content online, and then the classroom has to fundamentally change and become one that is, where they produce stuff, where they're makers, where they're doers, where they're, discussions, disputation, field trips, coaching, where they work where their misunderstandings are psychoanalyzed and fixed. These are the opportunities, and that's what we call blended learning. And so that's a huge opportunity from COVID is let's learn the lessons of doing online right, not the lessons of doing online wrong, but let's learn the lessons of doing online right. Khan Academy is an example, and then flip the classroom and embrace new pedagogy. And I mentioned boot camps earlier. Boot camps are something we developed because for all our online content, of course, is meant for people who don't have access to in person. But if you can take a week off, a boot camp is a sort of an in-person hackathon where you apply the stuff that you learned online. And in a regular classroom, a flipped classroom, you can do it in every class. Every classroom becomes a studio or a workshop or a discussion opportunity. Next slide. And as I said, new technology is coming down the pike. I mean, it's now rumored that Apple will be releasing a AR set. You have Microsoft HoloLens, Google did Google Glasses. I suspect they'll come back. There are other technologies from a bunch of companies on augmented reality, virtual reality. We've learned a lot from computer games, and AI and digital tutors are just beginning to happen. Very exciting. And these will be especially important tools when it comes to workforce education, because now imagine that a worker, as she's, for example, fixing some piece of equipment, maybe she has a VR headset on that's giving her instructions on how to fix it, but also giving her training, maybe teaching how to troubleshoot, maybe prompting her to learn new stuff and say, listen, on the subway ride home, if you want, I can play for you a podcast on, new materials in the equipment that you're using, or new control or computer programs. And through this, you can sneak in critical thinking and continuously assess the learning of the individual. Next slide. Next slide. And what this also means that universities have to go through a new sort of social contract. The social contract of universities, in my view, is getting more and more out of date. Think about it. I mean, it's sort of like, imagine if I told a young person, listen, you need to exercise for the first 4 years of your life, and you'll be healthy for the rest of your life. Well, it's clearly not true. I mean, the truth is, you need to exercise when you're young, but even as you grow older, you need to go to the gym, 3 times a week or something. You can't just sit at home and assume that that 4-year investment is going to pay off for the rest of your life. So universities have to figure out how to change the social contract. And then they've also got to figure out what they're good at and what they're not very good at. I mean, to be very frank with you, what we have here, the actual labels in that bar graph are not that important. But the point is, MIT is pretty good at organizing a delivery framework. We created edX. We're very good at creating online platforms. We created edX and we created new pedagogy. But can we actually deliver technician level training of welding? No, we're not going to be very good at it. And so the opportunity here is for MIT to figure out what it's good at and what it's not so good at, and to partner with other entities and to interdigitate so that what we're good at, the partner doesn't have to provide. But what the partner is good at, we provide, right? So this interdigitation is the opportunity. And so this means that education institutions can partner with community colleges, with vocational technology schools, with companies. And this is a new social contract that educational institutions need to embrace. Next slide.
So what are the policy implications here? Sanjay has been telling us about the new education technologies that we need to develop and implement. And there's a suite of them, and the opportunities are profound. But in addition, we're going to need short courses, right? Incumbent workers can't take 2 years off from their jobs and families and go to get a 2-year degree, for example, in a new field or a related field to where they're working. they're going to have short courses, and we're going to need more shorter courses tied to certificates. And the certificates are going to need to be part of industry approved credentials so that they can be recognized by industry and translated into job opportunities. And we are also going to need community college programs that reach not simply community college students, but incumbent workers, right? And those incumbent worker programs are often going to need to be delivered at the site of employers. And if they're small employers, groups of small employers who band together to offer these programs. We need community colleges going to reach not just community college students, but high school students as well. So we start to erase that work-learn barrier between high school and the work world. We're going to need more apprenticeships, or what we could call apprenticeship light, for youth apprenticeships and community college level apprenticeships in fields that have clear opportunities for increased responsibility and wages. There are established apprenticeship programs that are sponsored by the Department of Labor, but in addition, programs that create work while learning is going on, what we're calling apprenticeship light here, are really going to be crucial to help erase that work-learn barrier. Employers, community colleges, regional industry associations, state and local governments can all be actors in attempting to put those together. We're going to need to increase the community college completion rate. In too many CCs, it's only about 1/3 complete their programs. That's just much too low. We start to really turn around the workforce education problem if we significantly increase that completion rate. We're going to need more technical and comprehensive high schools so that the work-learn barrier starts to be brought down. There'll be a state role for this and a local role. We're going to need an expanded employer role. And what we're seeing is that employers need to team up with the other actors, right? Standalone, one-off employer training programs, that's not an enduring model. Programs that are developed by groups of employers that in turn work with area education institutions, whether they're secondary schools or community colleges, and work with state and local government, those are more enduring. Those can be lasting programs that survive upturns and downturns. We're going to need new curriculum for advanced fields, right? We're seeing, for example, in advanced manufacturing, a whole new suite of technologies that are entering manufacturing. We don't have curricula for these yet, much less the ability to translate them into new education technologies and online. We're going to need unifying efforts at the state level. If the federal education and labor departments programs are not integrated, could the states bring them together? And we're seeing examples of that. And we're going to need a new labor market information system. Could there be an online navigator that helps a worker see what the job opportunities are in skill areas that the worker has got, where the worker has been working, or see job opportunities in kind of adjacent areas where they could rapidly acquire skills and move to a higher level kind of position? Could a labor market information system, an online navigator, help employers or help education institutions in the same kind of way? We could build such an online system. So among the recommendations we make, and there are a number in the book, we recommend this kind of trifecta, that community colleges have got to take on the job of not just reaching community college students, but incumbent workers and high school students as well. And community colleges have a great advantage here. They're not locked in to the traditional agricultural semester system that universities seem to be. They can go 24/7. They can go 365 days a year. They can have short courses and longer courses if they get organized around the ability to do that, and some are. We can do youth apprenticeships. I saw a very dynamic youth apprenticeship program in South Carolina that Sanjay and I both have been reviewing. They start an apprenticeship program in high school. A group of area companies came to the nearby community college and said, look, we're willing to start hiring in the junior year of high school part-time to help ensure a pathway into our jobs for well-skilled workers. And we're prepared to hire students at a very good wage. And the community college took them up on this. The Chamber of Commerce backed this. The state Education institutions were supportive. They put together a very interesting youth apprenticeship program in the Charleston area, and a high school students program it's a different world for them. We all know how disruptive and sometimes self-destructive high schools can be, that high school experience can be. But in Charleston, if you're in this apprenticeship program, you go to your high school in the morning, and by the way, your employer tells you got to take math and science. Then at around noontime, you go off to the technical college nearby, and you get your kind of technical skills courses there. And then in the later part of the afternoon, you're at your employer, earning very good money. And for high school, you're with the kind of income you're making, you're king of the hill. It's a great thing. It's a great thing to have that additional income. But most importantly for these high school students, they're in with age cohorts that are much more mature. So high school in the morning, but then community college, typical age is 29. And then the workforce, the ages are going to be 35 to 45 often. So they're in much more mature environments, learning a more mature outlook on the world. And they're into the work world as well as completing high school. And by the time they complete high school, they'll have taken enough community college degrees to have finished the first year, and their employer will typically pay for the second year. So then they're on the way in a pathway. We could do that at much larger scale in other parts of the country, and some states, in fact, are starting to do this. Community college funding needs to improve, and we found ways to improve the completion rates. Some very interesting programs that we've seen in Tennessee are very promising, and really just completely turning around the completion rate by integrating remedial coursework with the skilled coursework that students want for new jobs. We're seeing short programs starting to evolve, 8, 10, 15-week programs that older students or students with families can manage. We're seeing regional workforce efforts by groups of employers working with states and community colleges. We're seeing integrated federal programs undertaken at the state level. So, for example, Massachusetts and Florida are doing very interesting efforts to integrate the Labor Department programs at the federal level and the Education Department level in a more unified state delivery model. We're seeing the beginnings of labor market information systems. And, as Sanjay spelled out, we're starting to see some very interesting education technologies. We're going to need to train more people in these skills than we have places in education institutions before. So we're going to need online, and that's going to be an important scaling mechanism to help and will enable more blended learning. So coronavirus brought home the importance of workforce education in addressing our inequality. We've got an opportunity now. Will we act on it? Thank you.
Back to you, Joshua.
Thank you both for your valuable and thought-provoking presentation. Can you hear me? Wonderful.
Yes.
I know we have about 10 minutes, a little over 10 minutes left, and there are a few questions that have come through. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to pick them up from the most recent to the older questions. And we have a question where they're asking students want to see their ROI when enrolling in post-secondary education. I guess that was a comment. So the first question that I want to present to you is, what are some of the best strategies to engage employers in these workforce development activities?
Bill, do you want to take a stab at that?
Sure. I mean, employers overall in the U.S. are facing a big challenge, right? We've got changing demographics in the U.S. There's going to be more demand for skilled workers. And we're already seeing that in many sectors. Many more skilled jobs are just going for the asking because we don't have folks well enough trained to be able to fit for them. So employers, I think, overall are going to become more sensitive than they have been in the past to these workforce needs. And the best strategy that we're seeing for employers, as I said earlier, is for them to come together in groups of fellow employers, figure out what common courses in their sectors that they need, and then work with area education institutions in developing those programs. And they could typically be short programs. They may be longer programs. We want to be sure the short programs are stackable so that they can lead over time to degrees. Because again, that college degree is a crucial credential now, and I think will continue to be in the workforce. So we want both. We want both credentials they can get jobs with, but the degrees that will give them longer lasting standing. So I think increasingly employers are going to turn to this. There's a real opportunity to encourage them to do this. So, for example, the Chamber of Commerce has a program doing exactly this, that it's now attempting to spread through employers in different parts of the country.
Thank you. Next question, based on your findings, what will be the top 2 skills, technical or interpersonal, that employers will be looking for in the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, I mean, from my perspective, I think digital skills, I think we've all learned, are going to be essential. We all have to become trilingual, 2 languages, and computational thinking is a language. That's one. And then the other is interpersonal skills are going to become really important. We have a human skills matrix. It's really a blend. It's not a single skill. And the reason is that more and more people are going to have to become the CEOs, chief marketing officers, the chief learning officers, the chief technology officers, the chief sales officers of their own lives. And so some understanding, a significant understanding of human beings, negotiation, empathy, relationships is going to become essential. No one is an individual contributor anymore. Everyone is, so has to become a master of many trades.
All right, thank you so much. The next question is, the focus is on high school students and the 20 to 45-year age group. What about the age group 55 plus? How will upskilling and reskilling their job prospects when they lose jobs or about to lose jobs? Because this age group is staying in the workforce much longer than the previous generation, so that needs to be addressed as well, especially upskilling.
Bill, you're muted. Okay, I'll just speak while Bill figures out. I think there's some audio issue there, but I'll just say that I think the most important thing right now is that you could be sitting and enjoying and feeling that you have a great job, which is good, but not realizing that in fact it's being eroded somewhere else. So I really think that just as a doctor comes in and might say, listen, this number is up and you want to get some treatment preemptively, we need to get into a preemption mechanism. We don't want people to have obsolescence creep up on them. We talk about technologies becoming obsolescent. We should start thinking about people getting obsolescent and prepare them so that they're not. So first of all, we need some sort of AI system, some system that looks at your resume and says, these are the things you need to learn to become relevant, because let's say you're a nurse. 3D radiology is coming down the pike. You need to learn it. And I think that if we can work out workforce education, it becomes a vitamin, a vaccination that helps people keep their jobs. Having said that, I think this whole question of 55 plus is a profound question.
Yeah. And
there are no easy answers. It needs a lot of research, and more importantly, action following the research.
Couldn't agree more. So do you see post-secondary institutions as conveners of school districts, workforce agencies, and employers to develop a master strategic plan to prepare the future regional workforce for the RGV? I guess the question is already flashed. I'm not going to repeat it.
Yeah, the answer is yes, absolutely. Who else is going to do it? I mean, the fact of the matter is, when new needs arise, existing institutions may or may not be prepared to do it.
Yeah.
And some institutions, like universities, that's my comment about the social contract, they need to step up to the plate. They need to spread their wings, and they need to fill in the gaps. Professors and universities cannot think that their role is what it was 10 years ago.
Couldn't agree more. So let's take the next question. What is the national trend on the application of, let me see here, pre-apprenticeships, apprenticeship lights, if it is similar, in the strengthening of the apprenticeship programs for career placements and trainings?
Well, I'll just, I don't know if Bill is back. Bill, can you hear us? Or can you speak? No, we can't hear you. Okay, I'll just fill in. So the fact of the matter is that apprenticeships is very well known in Europe. It comes from the guild system pre-industrial revolution to a large extent, and then it continued. And then you can get an apprenticeship at Mercedes in manufacturing, and the certificate will give you a job at BMW or Volkswagen. That's a cultural thing which this country doesn't have, because this country's industrial revolution, the lows of the world, it happened with it was driven by immigrant labor, right? That's really what happened. And so apprenticeship wasn't necessarily a sort of a part of the social contract. Now, so first of all, that needs to grow. Then the second piece of it is that in America, there used to be vocational technical schools. Massachusetts has 27. Switzerland has this. While you're in high school, you can do an internship. And we talk about it in our book. You can do an internship, and it prepares you, or you can start going to community college, right, and learning stuff. So this exposure to work, which is sort of a pre-apprenticeship, is weak in this country, but it needs to be taken on. Many countries have a two-track educational system, right? Technical track and sort of a university track, or a job track, vocational track. I'm not suggesting we need to create all of that, but some aspect of exposure to work is inevitable if you want to make an impact.
Yeah. Monica, can you splash the next question, please? Flash it. There we go. Thank you. All right. So in the past 20 years, the RGV, which is the Rio Grande Valley, has been hyper-focused on promoting early college, high school programs, but yet the local workforce lacks in creating jobs for four-year graduates.
Well, I mean, that's...
it's a comment.
Yeah, it's a comment. And the fact of the matter is that I think we are in a slightly over-credentialed society, right?
Yeah.
This is a sort of a bigger issue we need to take on. That's my point. We lost the middle way, right? It's high school or college. In middle way, there is, the associate's degree, but we need to sort of strengthen that and legitimize it.
All right. So this one is part 2 of the part 1. Let's flash the part 1 first, and then we'll get to part 2 again. Yes.
That was part 1.
That was part 1. I'm sorry. Yeah, let's go to part 2. I guess this is another comment, or is it a question? It says, do you think pushing for a 4-year degree can be beneficial for such a low-income region in South Texas?
Well, I don't know South Texas very well, so I'm completely out of my depth here. But I will say that looking at other regions that may or may not be similar, I think that sometimes pushing for college degrees plays into the over-credentialing issue. Don't get me wrong. I want my kid to get a college degree, right? But the fact of the matter is that are you better off getting a 2-year degree and then working and then coming back and getting a college degree? We've got to be open to all these things.
Absolutely. Monica, if you can flash some comments as well if there are no more questions. Yeah, we had quite an engaging audience, and it was interesting to see some of the comments and questions come through. So, in closing, yeah, so there's another comment. It says, in order for an individual to excel with online learning, they must be mentally prepared and have the initiative required to sit in front of a computer without any direction from an instructor. So this is where I guess you had shared some thoughts about you had actually made a, comparison between remote ed versus online ed, right?
That's right.
So that was an interesting thought that you shared. So you're saying that online ed is possibly the future of the education?
Yeah. The way to think about it, what we're seeing with Zoom lectures is not good online education. That's not how you should do it. The way to do it is the teacher has to set up the curiosity and the conditions so that the student goes to the online hungry. You can't just serve up food to the student when they're not hungry and say, eat it. They won't eat it, right? You've got to make them hungry. So you've got to, explain why this online content is important, what they will learn, right? You've got to make sure and set up a pattern where they actually watch it, right, or do it. And then you've got to use it in the classroom in a flip mode. That's the right way to do it. The way we're doing online right now is go do stuff online. Doesn't work that way. So it's a whole pedagogy that one has to think through.
Absolutely. So there's another question. It says, what would your advice be to students who are about to graduate in 2021 with a college degree?
I would say, first of all, congratulations. I would say that be prepared to be entrepreneurial, be prepared to be flexible. Go look at the job market, go look at what people are looking for, and go self-educate. Look for internships, look for experience. Don't assume that your degree is it. Take charge of your life.
Yes. Bill, can you hear us?
I can hear you well. Can you hear me?
Absolutely. Any thoughts that you want to share? I know we're coming up on the hour, so I just want to respect your time as well. Any thoughts that you wanted to share as well?
I think the opportunities for really building a workforce education system are profound now. It's a system we desperately need. But I think, this is not a partisan issue. There are not Republican and Democratic positions on workforce education. I think there's a genuine societal consensus that we need progress here. And I think that we've had enough experiments that we can see what the tool set will be to build it. So I think there's a great opportunity and to take advantage of what we've been learning in recent years. Sanjay's laid out the online opportunities, but there are organizational and policy opportunities that we can jump on.
Absolutely. Definitely, there needs to be better communication, dialogue between workforce development organizations, higher ed education, including community colleges, four-year universities, and definitely employers as well. So there needs to be better communication between what the gap is, where the needs are, and kind of universities and higher ed collectively fulfilling that gap. That's where we need to be headed as well. That's my 2 cents. Thank you so much to both of you for joining us today with us. And we had about 130 people that signed up, and a good half of them were online today. And we'll be sharing it. It's being live cast on YouTube and some of our other social media platforms as well. So the reach will be much higher than who we had on the call today. So I appreciate all of you for joining us. We will be sharing the link as well with people who might have missed the webinar this morning. And for those of you who commented, we really, really appreciate your engagement during this presentation. The book, Workforce Education, A New Roadmap, is available on Amazon. I've already purchased the book. I'm halfway through. Someone in my position would definitely need the knowledge that both the authors have shared. So I'm definitely going to be looking forward to implementing some of those ideas as well. And also for the audience that's with us today, we will be rolling out more and more webinars like this that are thought-provoking. We'll bring people like Dr. Sarma and Dr. Bonvillian from other parts of the country that will share their knowledge with us to develop our South Texas region as well. And follow us, subscribe to our channel on YouTube, so that you do not miss out on any of these future webinars that we will be rolling out. But without further ado, I want to thank everyone for joining us. Thank you both for joining us from Boston. Stay safe, stay warm. For us, we should be saying stay cool because we're already in the 90s today. But hopefully you'll have a wonderful day as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.